and get progressively smaller. Not all sets of these are color-coded, so sometimes they just simply have numbers on them, or maybe no numbers. I like the colored ones, but I think it also makes it way too easy to just know, like, hey, this mannequin is yellow, and not actually go through the steps of sizing it. And so then if you're somewhere where they're not color-coded, you're like, oh wait, how do you do that again? You always skip that step. So please just really go through all the actual steps. So BSI, next I'm going to select the appropriate airway. So I have to just sort of guess. Clearly this is a pediatric size one. That looks like a small adult. This looks ginormous. Yeah. Like I'll put that in the Incredible Hulk. So I'm going to guess it's probably one of these two in the middle. And between those two I don't really know. So I'm going to have to just figure it out by measuring it. Now there are basically two reasonable techniques for doing this. One of them is to measure, as your book says here, from the middle of the mouth to the angle of the jaw. So the middle of the mouth is right there, you know, midline, and the angle of the jaw is this place right where your jaw, you know, forms a point, like where we were talking about doing the jaw thrust on. So in this mannequin, it's the point right there. So if I measure from the middle of the mouth to the angle of the jaw, that actually looks like a pretty good, I'll do there, a pretty good size. Yeah. This is just an approximation, you know, it's like a rule of thumb anatomically, but that's a reasonable size airway for this guy. The alternate method is from the corner of the mouth to the tip of the earlobe. So now going from the corner of the mouth all the way down to the tip of the earlobe. This maybe actually looks a little big if I go that method. So corner of the jaw down, it goes a little past the tip of the earlobe. I know from having done this before that actually the yellow size airway fits better in this mannequin, because it is just a rule of thumb. Yeah. You won't know that though, so let's try to put this one in and we'll see what happens. So I've got my gloves on. I measured the airway, so I measured it from the middle of the mouth to the angle of jaw, or the corner of the mouth to the earlobe, and I'm going to insert the airway in a manner that will not push the tongue back. So there are two ways that you can do this. I like to start with having the airway nice and open, cross finger technique like we talked about in lecture. And there's two techniques for an adult. One is you can, so when this is in the mouth, it's going to reach around the tongue like that, to hold the tongue back. You can start with it upside down, advance it into the mouth until it hits the soft palate, the back, the roof of the mouth. So just until you kind of hit back there, and then you're going to rotate it a full 180 degrees until it sits in the airway like that. I personally think that the other way works better. I just like it better, which is to insert it at 90 degrees, like this, and then rotate it the last way. Now that second method is how you're going to always want to do it for pediatrics, because kids have a very fragile roof of the mouth, and it's too easy with this hard plastic to actually cut it and cause bleeding. So either you're going to do it at 90-degree angle, or you're going to actually use the tongue depressor. Some of them do carry a tongue depressor, and lift the tongue back with a tongue depressor and then put it straight in. The reason you can't just put this straight in without a tongue depressor is that if it kind of catches on the tongue, you can actually push, like kink the tongue and push the tongue back. You can end up with like a flap of the tongue wedged in the back of the airway just where you're trying to not have there be an obstruction. So more harm done than good there. So that's why you always, when you do it upside down, then the curved part kind of rolls off the top of the tongue and it won't cause the tongue to bunch up, the same way as if I do this and kind of catch on a flap of the tongue. Does that make sense? Yeah. So anyway, up to you. I urge you to play with both methods, see what's easier, 90 degrees or 180. Just make sure that by the end it's in like that. So go back to me putting this into 90 degrees. You see how when I stick it in, it actually sticks up a little? The flange doesn't rest against the lip? Yeah. That's actually because this airway is a little too big. And I, you know, like I said, I only know this from having done this 100 times on Spread the Head. If I take the next smaller size airway and I try to measure it, corner of the mouth to the earlobe actually looks pretty good in this case. That actually looks like a good measurement. But if I go center of mouth to angle of the jaw, it looks too small. So this, you know, whether it's not 100% anatomically correctly shaped or whether it's just, you know, like I said, it's a rule of thumb. If you put an airway in somebody and it sticks up like that, that's an indication that's too big, it's not resting behind the tongue. So you want to take it out and just try the next size smaller. So now when I put this in, look at that. That fits much better. The flange is resting right at the lip. So this is a better size airway for this head. But I didn't know that until I just tried one and had it not fit, try the other. Realistically, they're not hugely different in size. You know, they're a little bit different, but there's not a huge difference. You know, most people aren't going to be like exactly one side or the other, you're sort of somewhere in between. So should you round up or round down, you can probably make do with either. But if you have grossly too big or grossly too small of an airway, you're going to either cause more of an airway obstruction than you had to start with, or simply not help at all. Not actually pull the tongue away from the back of the throat. So, you know, strive your very best to get it sized well, but it's not something where I want you to be taking like 3 or 4, you know, comparing them. Really just go for what you think is the best, assess it. If it looks good, awesome, stick with it and move on. And if it looks like it doesn't fit, take it out and adjust as necessary. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I had this in, and the patient were to start to gag, I would want to immediately remove it, and you just remove it by pulling it straight out, following the natural curvature of the airway. So you don't have to twist it on the way out. When you guys are practicing with this, just a note to please be pretty careful. This is hard plastic, and these airway heads are kind of fragile. You can chip the teeth, you can rip the rubber in the mouth, so just, you know, don't treat this like a piece of concrete, treat this like a valuable piece of...
Like a person.
Like a person. Treat this like my grandma, who's a little bit fragile. Okay, so if we were to have a patient who starts to gag and we had to remove the oral airway, we would then move on to the nasal airway.
So you don't notice to wear gloves, but what should we say? Like, appropriate
PSI.
Oh, is that? Oh.
Nothing else to say. You can say I'm donning appropriate body substance,
Okay.
and you can say I have on gloves. And in fact, any airway management, I think probably BSI also includes eye protection as well, because anytime you're doing something where there could be fluids that get aerosolized. But it's for the purposes of touch, you can just say BSI.
When it